Musical Talk, the UK independent musical theatre podcast.
Hello, welcome to Musical Talk. My name is Nick Hudson. I'm joined here by my good friend Robert Gordon. Hello, Robert. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, Nick.
What's been going on in your life?
Well, I've been going a lot to the theatre and seeing a lot of musicals, as always.
Yeah.
And writing a book about Candour and Ebb,
Still?
all sorts of things. Yes, it's finished now.
You got
the publisher.
do tell us about a book you do have, which is the Handbook of the British Musical, isn't it?
Yes. Well, Olaf Eubine and myself co-edited the Oxford Handbook of the British Musical, but we've also just brought out the Oxford Handbook of the Global Stage Musical, which we did a launch for at the Victoria and Albert Museum last week, and that was great fun.
How did that go?
Very well. Very well indeed.
So you want, we're kind of asking people at this time of year what your highlights of the last year have been, what you're looking forward to this year. Anything you'd like to mention on that fact, Robert?
Yes, I'd say probably the two highlights were the new production, which has come from Chichester, Cameron Mackintosh's new production of Oliver, directed and choreographed by Matthew Bourne. I thought that was absolutely stunning. They finally went back to the older production, which was done in the 60s.
Sean Kenny.
Yes,
sets.
Sean Kenny designs. They didn't use the exact Sean Kenny designs, but they were obviously inspired by them. And they had two revolves, as Sean Kenny did. But it was darker, especially the opening 15 minutes, the scene in Mr. Sowerberry, the Undertaker, the scenes at the workhouse, much darker than the Palladium productions, which tried to echo the film. And what I was struck by was not only there was a brilliant Nancy, who was absolutely
Speak for yourself, Robert.
who looked very young. Maybe she isn't as young as she looked, but she looked very young, and a wonderful Fagin by Simon Lipkin. And
He's kind of the stuff I've been hearing is being portrayed as sexy Fagin.
yeah, in a way, because he doesn't look quite so old, and he's very lithe, and he moves. I think he is a magician,
Yeah.
and you can notice that by looking at his hands, the way he uses his hands in a very, very flexible way. But the other person, and I'm afraid I don't remember the name of the cast, the actor. But the man who played Mr. Bumble absolutely had a stunning voice and gave that part real value. But actually, I think everybody in the cast was good. And the only person I would say was slightly overdoing it was the Widow Corney. It was a slightly over-the-top performance. But I think everybody... I mean, when Nancy sang As Long as He Needs Me, you felt you were hearing Judy Garland. I mean, there is a version by Judy Garland which is absolutely brilliant. And she did it. I mean, on stage, every night she does this. And it's not that easy. And it was absolutely brilliant. But I thought the whole conception, the choreography, the way the movement was set out, the way the sets changed, and the way that the darkness suddenly gave way to light with Consider Yourself. I think that's written into the musical. But it was a production. It's the first production for years that made one really see the genius of Lionel Bart. It was absolutely, revelatory in that way. You thought, this guy really understood theatre. And there it is, 1960, when the British were doing so many different things, and the musicals, even the more modern and darker musicals that were coming out in the late 50s, they were never not as ambitious as Oliver, which took, this classic tale, English tale of Oliver Twist, and turned it into, one of the most original musicals that there's ever been in London. So that was a highlight.
And it's testament that 50 years on, or 60 years on,
yes,
it can still play in the West End.
Absolutely. That it was absolutely full on a Tuesday night, and the audience was enraptured. And it was like, in a way, seeing and hearing a dramatization of an old folk tale that one kind of was quite familiar with, but one was being still surprised by it. And that's the impact it had. Now, the other highlight, I think, was what I saw only last Saturday, which was Opera North's brilliant production of Love Life. And this was done in Leeds. I went up to Leeds to see it.
Not a musical I know, so I might speak for some listeners when we say, what's that?
Well, Love Life is by Alan J. Lerner, who wrote the book and the lyrics, and Kurt Weill. And it's the penultimate musical that Kurt Weill completed. And it's regarded, in a sense, as the first genuine concept musical, which inspired Sondheim and Kander and Ebb in the 70s. So it's way ahead of its time, highly original. The two central characters who go all the way through, they're a husband and wife, and they go all the way through from the 18th century to 1948. So we see their marriage at different stages in history. So it is a sort of an allegory.
When did this come out?
The original?
Yeah.
In 1948.
Okay.
And there's an interesting story, and that's why this Opera North production is so important.
I only asked because at Disneyland there is an attraction/show called the Carousel of Progress, where you see the same family through 5 different eras of history and how things have changed. And I just wonder, perhaps, if that was if this show were an inspiration for that.
I think you're quite right. I think it is an inspiration for that, because I think that there is a song sung by the chorus who act as a sort of vaudeville act throughout the show. They link all the different episodes. There are 5 episodes, and they do use a sort of carousel motif at one point, and there is a song called Progress. Yeah. So I think
this show has a Sherman Brothers song called There's a Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow, and it links each scene and the cool thing is you sit in a theatre where the audience, 50 people, load into a block of seats, and there's a stage in front of them. And when that scene is finished, the seats move around to the next scene. So the previous scene is then loaded. So the whole thing just keeps going and going and going, much like it's about technology, effectively.
Well, we didn't quite have the technology in Leeds, but we did. I think this musical certainly inspired that particular. And obviously the Sherman Brothers are exactly of the age of people who would have seen the show in 1948. Now, the thing about the 1948 production, which starred Nanette Fabray, then quite well known on film, is that there was some sort of industrial action happening, I don't know, but it affected the gramophone, the recording industry, and so they never made an original cast recording. And the E&O production is being recorded under the aegis of the Kurt Weill Foundation, and this will be the first complete cast album of Love Life. But I hope that Opera North tour it beyond Leeds. It has the 2 major characters are Sam and Susan Cooper, and Sam Cooper is played by I think it's Curine DeLung, and Susan is played by Stephanie Corley, and these are both opera singers. The man is Dutch and the woman British. But I think that I've never seen opera singers so comfortable with what is actually a musical, though it has some kind of operatic features. And the chorus of Opera North, who play all the other parts, are brilliant. I mean, it was brilliant. It's one of the most extraordinary evenings I've seen, and certainly a wonderful and welcome surprise to see an opera company do so well with a musical by a great composer who also did write operas.
Is it an opera or a musical? Sorry to lower that question on you.
I think it's actually a musical, but it's written so closely, and Weill did his own orchestrations, that you might have thought it could be an opera, but it is a musical.
Is it touching or comedic or
Both? It's very touching. It's very sad because it's about illusion and disillusion, and it's about the hopes and dreams that have inspired people to get married and have children and live happily ever after. And of course, they don't live happily ever after. It's a masterpiece, really, as written by Weil and Lerner, and it's a long overdue for the showing that it got, the hearing that it got in Leeds.
And where is it in the canon of Lerner? Because it's quite early, isn't it, compared to some of their other stuff?
No, of Lerner, yes. It's the penultimate show that Kurt Weill wrote, but it's 1948. So it's really just after Lerner and Lowe had written Brigadoon. So it comes before My Fair Lady, quite a few years before My Fair Lady. But, of course, Lerner had, in a way, at least two careers, one with Frederick Lowe and the other with a number of other composers that he wrote with.
A bit like Hammerstein.
Well, yes, well, a lot. I mean, he wrote a lot with Burton Lane. He wrote a bit with Kurt Weill, and he wrote with other composers too.
Which composer do you think he wrote the best with?
Burton Lane. Yeah, Burton Lane. I think he
Not Lowe.
Oh, no.
Sorry, I'm talking about Alan J. Lerner here.
Yeah, Lerner wrote. I think. Obviously, the masterpiece is My Fair Lady, and that was with Lowe. But he wrote some pretty good scores, some pretty good songs with Burton Lane, who's a very underrated composer. I wouldn't say, though, that the shows with Burton Lane, the books weren't as good as My Fair Lady. But the book which Lerner wrote for this show is revolutionary. So it actually shows the range of Lerner's work. And of course, Weill was very intelligent in the way that he came from Berlin and found some of the most interesting and experimental book writers and lyric writers in New York.
Is it based on something, or is it a completely original piece?
Totally original. Well, I'll move just very briefly to one of the worst experiences I had last year, and that's sadly The Devil Wears Prada. Because although Vanessa Williams and others in the cast were very, very good, the show is in a way superfluous. If you've seen the film, this sort of recycles the film with a lot of numbers that seem irrelevant to the telling of the story, and they hold up the telling of the story. And some of the numbers are, not bad, but it's certainly, and it was very spectacular. The designs for the first few numbers are excellent, and then the designer seems to go off track a bit when he or she is supposed to be designing, haute couture. It ends up being just rather ordinary. And sometimes quite grotesque, but it seems to be. I mean, the audience. There's a willing audience for this. There's an audience that's primed, who've loved the film and are fans of the film with Meryl Streep, and the audience when I was there consisted largely of women and gay men. Now, I've got nothing against an audience of women.
I.e., you were at a musical.
Yes, well, I've got nothing against that, but good for them. They keep musicals going. But it did seem like these were primed already. They came to see the film done as a musical. They would have come anyway, whatever the reviews were. I think the reviews were pretty poor, but the audience is there for the show because of the film.
Hannah said last week her issue would be with it is she's a massive fan of the book of The Devil Wears Prada, yes. And the film made the mistake of not going as heavily with adult material as the book did. So she would want the musical to be based on the book, but judging by your review, Robert, it isn't.
It's based on the film.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can recognise all sorts of moments in the film, some of which are key moments which have been musicalised, but then you think, well, the film is a comedy and it moves fast. Why hold up the action to musicalize something that, in a sense, makes its own point as farce? Sometimes farce can be musicalized, as in Hello, Dolly. But in this respect, I felt there was only one song in a hospital, which was really rather grotesquely funny. But I found everything else was a bit obvious.
Do you think it's another case of Elton John shouldn't really write musicals?
No, I think it was I think the songs are workmanlike, but I think it was the dramaturgy and the lyrics that, for me, were the weakest point. Because they didn't add anything to the film. And if you think, why do a musical if you're actually simply, in a way, detracting from the fun of the film?
We're asking our listeners and friends what you're looking forward to this year. So what are you looking forward to this year, Robert?
Well, I'm not sure what's on this year. You give me a few prompts. What's opening that's new?
I'm looking forward to as I said last week, I'm looking forward to the Alan Menken concert. I'm looking forward to Clueless, and I'm looking forward to Coraline.
Yes.
Also looking forward to seeing Hercules at the Theatre Royal Drury Lane.
I think I must say that it's Coraline and Hercules that seem most interesting to me. That might sound a little bit lowbrow, but to hell with it. I think those are the shows. Yes, another new musical that's coming that I'm not actually looking forward to, but I'm very curious about, is The Great Gatsby, because that's still running in New York, but it hasn't been a huge success.
Well, there's two versions running in New York. Are there? There's two. This is like the Wild Party all over again. You've got one version and you've got another version. You're talking about the one that's coming to the Coliseum this summer, aren't you?
Yes, and very peculiar choice of venue. Huge venue for a sort of musical.
But it might be a huge musical.
Yes, but I'm not sure anything can fill the Colosseum except for operas or I don't know. Perhaps a huge so-called mega musical of the past can do that. I saw Chess there and I saw Sunset Boulevard there, and they were okay. I'm intrigued by Clueless, the musical. I would certainly want to go and see that.
Evita, you looking forward to Jamie Lloyd doing Evita? Well, I'm sure she'll be in a T-shirt and black and white and things.
Not really. I think that the Sunset Boulevard was superb, but there's only so much I can take of the Jamie Lloyd approach. It might be very different to Sunset Boulevard.
Is Jamie Lloyd as original as people give him credit for when it comes to this style of production with filmed footage and no set and kind of...
I'd say he's intelligent rather than entirely original. I mean, other people have done these sort of stripped-down monochromatic productions. That's not in itself original. But I think the fact that he cast...
Nicole Scherzinger.
Nicole Scherzinger.
Yeah.
Was a remarkable, that in itself was very clever, because she's the one that's lifted the show into real commercial and critical success, and she is wonderful. But I think the whole cast is good. So I think his casting was good. His decision not to go the route of the spectacular, which Trevor Nunn had done originally in 1990, is also very intelligent. It's not entirely original if you look at a lot of theatre as a whole, but it's unusual for a huge musical which was first premiered with a spectacular set to be done as simplified a setting as this.
I guess it's the kind of thing where you look at it and think, what can we do to set this apart? You just do the exact opposite, but you make the cast and you make everything brilliant. Well,
I think what he did was also, what do I do to make the audience really listen to this, rather than be distracted by, it's really happening to some extent in the minds of the two protagonists. A lot of it, it's their fantasies, it's what they see and what they feel. And I think that's why it was clever choice of mise en scène.
I want to encourage you, Robert, if you can get a ticket. I know they've added Thursday matinees recently, and that's to see the producers at the Menier Chocolate Factory.
I am seeing that on Thursday.
Lovely. Because I saw it just before Christmas, and I watched the film of the musical again yesterday, and it's such a brilliant. I mean,
Yes.
it's so
Yes.
clever and funny, and to see it again scaled down and minimalized, it proves that and still get laughs and cheers and gasps of shock and things. It's still a wonderful piece.
Yes, well, I saw the producers with Nathan Lane in New York and then again at the Drury Lane Theatre in London. And although it was a great production, the theatres were both, it seemed to me, a little too large for the kind of comedy, so it was really rather broad, although, it was spectacular and it worked very well. But I'm really keen to see it because the essence of it is the wit, of Mel Brooks.
Well, Robert, thank you. I short episode this week, but it's just nice to have you back on, and we'll have you on to talk about the producers and whatever stuff you end up seeing. Good luck with the books and this and that and everything you do. And we'll have you on again soon, Robert. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Nick.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Musical Talk. To find out more about the world of Musical Talk, you can visit our website at musicaltalk.co.uk, where you'll find all our episodes, or you can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. Please follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Musical Talk.